Rinpoche is saying, Tashidele, all the Sangha, I'm so happy to see you all. Are you doing well? Tashidele, all the Sangha, Dharma friends on the live stream. And today I'm giving you an introduction to the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. And on this topic, actually, for example, the 80 Mahasiddhas of India gave many teachings. So there are many teachings on the 4 yogas. And so that may lead one to think that they are all different teachings. But they are actually not. They all come down to one essential point. And the Buddha Shakyamuni himself had said in the Samadhi-Raja Sutra that he said, I have taught the sutras, the teachings, thousands of them in 1,000 different worlds. And while my words are many, distinct, they have a single meaning. And if you cultivate, if you practice the single meaning of all these teachings, then you are actually practicing them all. So the Buddha taught 84,000 different Dharma teachings, endless teachings, but they all have to come down to one single essential point. And what is this point? It is now what we mentioned, what we will talk about today, the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. And what that means is ultimately everything has to come down to the mind, the nature of the mind. It is said that the mind is the basis, the foundation of all of samsaric existence and nirvana. And even though there are limitless sentient beings with a mind, everything comes back down to your own mind, one's own mind. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it says, appearances are your own mind. So the nature of your own mind and the nature of all phenomena in samsara and nirvana is the same, is one and the same. It all has a single basis, a single foundation. For example, nowadays in the world, in all the countries in the world, everything is powered by electricity. Everything is done really by electricity. But even though electricity does so many different things, there is really only one electricity. And the electricity itself is without existence or non-existence. It is without any such conceptual limitation. So we should recognize the mind just like that, like really the nature of electric energy. So when you understand the nature of your mind, then you have understood the root of all phenomena in samsara and nirvana. In the Dzogchen teachings, it is said the root of samsara and nirvana is your own intrinsic awareness. And in the Mahamudra teachings, for example, we received the teachings on the 4 yogas. In the Dzogchen teachings, there are 4 visions or visionary appearances. But it all comes down to a single essential point, and that is expounded upon in elaborate ways, in concise ways, but in the end, there's only one single essential meaning. And that is the natural state of your own mind. So this term yoga is also an important term. So the word yoga in Tibetan is naljo, and so nal comes from nalma, which means, nalma means the innate state of mind itself. So it's the innate nature. And innate is something that is always present continuously. It can never cease to be. So that is what we call an innate nature, the nalma. And then when one realizes this innate nature of mind, then everything that is perceived appears as its manifestation. And so normally when we don't realize this natural state, it seems that a great multiplicity arises. And that is because we follow our 6 afflictive emotions. First of all, we perceive a duality of self and other. And because of this perception, we develop thoughts of attachment and anger and so on. The 6 afflictive emotions arise in the mind. And this is how the water-like mind freezes into an ice block. And this is how then limitless sentient beings in the 3 or the 6 realms of samsara manifest. So it is just like the water has frozen due to the cold weather. And then it appears in various forms, like ice cubes or glacier, ice snow mountains, or ice plates floating in the ocean and so on. So it appears in many different forms, but it all has the same nature. And so similarly, all the various appearances have the nature of the mind. And samsara has the nature of the mind. Samsara and nirvana both. And so that is why it is said, understand that everything, what we call samsara and nirvana, is your own intrinsic awareness. When you realize it, you realize everything, the nature of everything. And so this term, Buddha or enlightenment, so Buddha means in Tibetan Sangye, and Sang means to clear away. And so when one realizes the nature of the mind, what becomes cleared away are the illusory perceptions of a concrete, true existence of appearing phenomena. And realizing that they lack inherent existence, it is like the ice block of the mind is melting. And so once the ice has melted, then the mind becomes vast. And that's the second syllable of Sangye. So Ye means vast or expansive. Then the ice block has merged indivisibly with the ocean and therefore becomes infinite. So that's the meaning of the name, this term Buddha. And so all phenomena of samsara and nirvana come from that natural state of the mind. And so when you recognize that, then first it seems to you that there is such a great multiplicity. Just in one lifetime, if you look around, you feel that even in my own mind, just there are so many thoughts all the time, just like dust particles in a sun ray. There are just so many. They are infinite. And we follow them all. We think about things of the past and we think about the future. And why is it that we do that? Or what is it that keeps clinging to these thoughts? It is because we grasp fundamentally at a dualistic existence of self and other. And because of this perception, we have a natural attachment to the self and an aversion against other. And this is what has caused the mind to solidify into an ice block. So it is our clinging to the concrete existence of the outer world and then also our concepts about it. So this is what has created samsara. In the Samantabhadra Prayer it says, when you recognize this, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing this, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. So when you recognize this, it is like recognizing actually ice is water and it can be melted. If I do not cling to the concrete existence of appearances and the thoughts in my mind. If you sustain such awareness, then it is like your mind becomes like hot water, and when there is heat, the mind cannot freeze into an ice block. So the nature of mind, the recognition of the nature of mind is like this heat, and you should never separate from it. And so not separating, how we not separate from it is on a relative level. We must never separate from love and compassion. And from the ultimate perspective, we must not separate from the view of emptiness. And so if one never separates from these, one attains enlightenment. And so this is what is meant in the Samantabhadra Prayer by saying, if you recognize it, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. So first, you have to understand the meaning of that. And then secondly, you must never separate from that. And then finally, in the end, once you have realized, then you cultivate compassion for all those sentient beings who have not realized this. And so this is basically the mind of a Buddha. It's a mind of emptiness and compassion. So that is all explained in the Samantabhadra Prayer, which is an extremely beneficial prayer for our practice. When you read it, you will see it really explains everything that is important. And so that is why it really serves as the basis for these teachings on the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. And if you think of it in this way, actually, you will understand the meaning quite easily. So that's why we always read the Samantabhadra Prayer on an ongoing basis, because it is a very clear instruction. And so the 4 yogas of Mahamudra, also they are related to the graduated path of, there is the bhumis and the paths. And regarding the bhumis and the paths, or the stages and the paths, the sutra teachings expound on that really elaborately. There are many teachings on that. But what are the bhumis and the paths? So for some people like myself who do not have so much learning, how can we understand that? So a bhumi, or a stage, is basically the stages in which we recognize the nature of the mind. So basically we recognize the nature of the mind in stages, gradually. And so that is really the meaning of saying having attained a bhumi. And then the paths, so there are 10 bhumis and 5 paths. In order to attain the 10 bhumis, one must enter the 5 paths. So if one enters the 5 paths, one attains the 10 bhumis. This is probably how it is. But then the Khenpos and your other spiritual teachers and so on, they all teach much about that. So also regarding the bhumis and the paths in brief, Milarepa had said, now what is the so-called progression of the bhumis and the paths is the increasing appearance of clarity and emptiness. So the increasing realization of clarity and emptiness within the mind. And so that is what we call the bhumis and the paths. So basically it's an increasing seeing of the nature of the mind gradually. Yeah? And so everything has to, so you have to understand that everything must come down back to your own mind. So first you have to see your own mind. You have to understand your own mind. And once you have seen it, you must habituate to this seeing until you realize it. And so as you continue to practice, the qualities inherent within yourself will reveal themselves more and more. It's like the growing of a flower. So first you have a sprout, and then it grows into like a closed flower and then an opened flower. And so this is how it is taught in the Vajrayana teachings in the context of the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. And also, everything is connected. The 4 yogas are connected to the 4 levels of empowerment and so forth. And so a feature of these teachings, the Vajrayana teachings, is that we are introduced to the nature in a very direct way. So these are the bhumis and the paths in brief. And so, for example, how our mind is currently, it is just like muddy water. It's still water, and in the beginning it was clear water, that's the nature. But temporarily, it has become polluted by mud, so it becomes muddy, it's not so clear. But then if you keep purifying it over and over again continuously, which is similar to meditating continuously, then eventually the mud will settle and you will see the nature of water, the nature of your mind. And so in the 4 yogas of Mahamudra, the first one is the One Pointedness, and so that is this settling down of the mud, so you come to see the true nature. So it is the meditation where everything calms down first, and then you habituate to this over and over again. And then once the water has become clear, then you can do all kinds of things with it, then it becomes useful. And so then you move on, so once it becomes useful, you move on to the second yoga, which is the unelaborated stage. And so here in the second stage, you continue to meditate without analyzing, thinking in terms of, is it in terms of existence or non-existence, without any conceptual limitations. So that is, as Milarepa had said, you continue on the same meditation, but the empty, clear mind just becomes increasingly clear as you keep meditating. And so that's what we call the bhumis and the paths, the different stages. Even though they're given different names, it's just an increasing becoming clear of your natural state. And so most of us, we begin with the Shamatha practice, calm abiding. So most of us practice that. So we can say that Shamatha, or calm abiding, is actually equivalent with the one-pointedness. And so then once you have achieved one-pointedness, you can abide in a single-pointed state, then you come to the unelaborated state, the second state, and that is the state of vipassana, or the special insight. So once you have become one-pointed, then you can see the nature of the mind, how it really is. So this is how I see it, how there really is a connection between one-pointedness and shamatha, and freedom from elaboration and non-elaboration, and vipassana. So this is how I see it, but I do not have much learning. So then number 3, the third yoga, is the yoga for one taste. So that is then next, once you have seen the true nature of the mind, then next you begin to realize that it is just like all the water in the world. You begin to realize that even though it appears in so many different forms, it's all the same water. You realize that Buddhas and sentient beings are one and the same. Also Milarepa actually had given teachings on the 4 yogas of Mahamudra that I had explained to most of my disciples. And so in any case, the one taste is where you realize that samsara and nirvana, everything has one taste. You realize that everything is actually the same, everything is one. And then you continue to meditate within that state. And so once you have realized that, if you then always remain unmovingly within that state, and you never again fall into confused states of grasping at the concrete existence of appearances and thoughts in the mind and so on, then finally you achieve the fourth yoga, which is the yoga of non-meditation. And this is an effortless state. So this is how the four yogas really are a gradual development of the realization of the mind. So even though we list different bhumis and different paths, and there's different teachings on that, this is really how we should see it. So this is also a very important teaching, the most important teaching really by Milarepa, where he said that the bhumis and the paths, the so-called bhumis and the paths, are the progressive realization, recognition of the clear and empty nature of the mind. And so then he continued on, but the bhumis and what is called the bhumis and the paths are nothing but how do you call it, like kind of like signs, like road signs. So you know where to go. They are just road signs. You know where you're at. So a practitioner needs some kinds of signs so they know they are on the right track. And for example, what are some road signs that guide us? For example, it is said that a sign of learning or hearing is a peaceful and subdued disposition, kind of behavior. And one will also consider karma very carefully. And a sign of meditation is an absence of afflictive emotions. So even though afflictive emotions do arise, they disintegrate instantly. And that is because you have understood that the object of your affliction is not separate from yourself. So you have recognized that self and other are indivisible. And so because of that, even though a momentary affliction may arise, an ordinary, unrestrained affliction cannot arise any longer once you have recognized this. And this is how gradually the qualities of your own mind reveal themselves as you progress on the bhumis and the paths. And ultimately, all those qualities are perfected within you in any moment. So again, first you have to understand the root of this. And then you have to continue to practice continuously. And so I am giving you an introduction on that topic to the best of my abilities, but it's more of an outline of the subject. But if you want to go in more depth, then we have many teachers like Khenpo Tenzin or other teachers all over the place that you can always receive teachings from. So I'm just giving like a kind of an introduction to the basic view on this topic. So I'm explaining this to you, Dharma friends, because you all, like me, an old man, and you want to listen to me. And if you like somebody, we usually like to listen to them. And so that's why you like to listen to me. It's not because I have a lot of learning or anything like that. It's because you like me and you like to listen to me. And so therefore, I'm going to do my best to explain this topic. And so how should we understand first the one-pointedness? So for as long as we have not realized the nature of the mind, we call our mind the consciousness. And in the consciousness, many different thoughts appear, limitless thoughts, hundreds of thoughts. There are hundreds of different thoughts constantly arising, but there is only one consciousness that recognizes all of these thoughts. The thoughts arise because the consciousness, which is the inner grasping mind, connects to an outer object. And then that leads to all kinds of thoughts arising in the mind. So even though there are many thoughts, there is just a single consciousness. It's always the same consciousness. And so for as long as we have not realized the nature of mind, this consciousness at the very bottom of this consciousness, we have the self. It all comes down to the self, the me. So currently, the me, this I, and the consciousness have become one. And so everything we grasp from my perspective, the I perceives a concrete outer existence and believes in the various concepts arising in the mind and clings to the true existence of their own body and all the other outer forms and shapes. That is the consciousness. And so the consciousness is a state where everything has become solidified and it seems to be real. The solid reality seems to be real because of the solidified clinging to a concrete existence. So this solidified grasping, it is constantly grasping at dualistic thoughts, has caused the layers of karmic imprints to deepen in the mind. And so because we keep placing imprints into our mind, we continue to accumulate karma. And that is what creates samsara. So first we have to understand this basis, which is the consciousness. Everything arises from this consciousness, which currently we identify with the I. And so from that arise a multitude of thoughts, but then there's just one consciousness. So for this reason, what we really need to analyze, look at, is the nature of that consciousness. And it is that when you realize its nature, then it matures into primordial wisdom. So not in an immature state, it is the consciousness. In the mature state, it is the primordial wisdom. And so what's the difference between them? The consciousness perceives a dualistic existence of self and other, and the universe and many different beings. And the consciousness believes in a concrete existence of appearances and one's own concepts. So everything has kind of melted with this I, with how one sees kind of through the lenses of the I. But then when you realize the nature of this consciousness, it becomes primordial wisdom, because then you realize that self and other are actually not separate. And once you see that, then the mind becomes primordial wisdom. And it is said that within the expanse of primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. So you realize that there is no duality, no separation. Everything is one mind. There is no outer and no inner and no self and other and so forth. This is also called the consciousness transferring into that state, or kind of transforming into the state of primordial wisdom. So how should we recognize each of these four levels of four yogas? Milarepa also said that everything is connected. The four yogas, for instance, are connected to the four empowerments, and we should practice always making this connection. And so how can we make this connection? So personally, when I was thinking about it, the connection I made is that, so first when we receive the first empowerment is the vase empowerment, which is the empowerment of the generation stage, the visualization. And that is connected to the yoga of one pointedness. And so seeing it in this way I find very beneficial. And also really connected to the way we practice the Vajrayana. And so then maybe you think that, but no, it's not really connected, because isn't the generation stage and the vase empowerment supposed to be elaborate visualizations, and isn't one pointedness just supposed to be meditation? So maybe people see that it's not quite the same. But actually, this is not true. It is actually the same, because now that generation stage, the visualization, the purpose of generation stage is to overcome our fixation on the concrete existence of appearances, to realize that whatever appears, outer and inner, the world and all sentient beings, all appearance only appears momentary, but actually, because due to being compounded phenomena, everything that appears is impermanent. It is just like what you're viewing is just like the dream of a single night. And so actually there is no discrepancy between a generation stage and meditation because of this essential point. Or for example, even though the outer world appears so solid and stable, and there's hundreds of different worlds and planets, in the end, none of it will stay, and it will all turn into dust. It is just a momentary, a temporary appearance, and it will all end and disintegrate because the nature of all appearance is impermanence. For example, science even has understood that to some extent. Now, they speak about, we don't know when this world is coming to an end, might be coming to an end, and then everybody is afraid about that. So the world is coming to an end because all appearance is just like a temporary bubble, a temporary water bubble, impermanent by nature. And so that is therefore not what we analyze. What we analyze is the mind. And when you look at the mind and you visualize the generation stage, what appears, the generation stage, the deity, is like a rainbow in the sky. And a rainbow is empty of self-nature. And also at the end of the visualization, we come to the completion. So at the end, everything dissolves. And that is correlated to one's understanding of impermanence. So this is how the generation leads to the completion or the dissolution. Or we can say that the daytime perception, our waking state perception, the clinging to the truth of the waking state perceptions is overcome through the visualization, the generation stage. And then at night, when we go to sleep, we enter into the completion stage of dissolution. So then this is how they become unified, generation and completion. And through this unifying, all grasping at a concrete reality becomes purified. And so then if we keep meditating on it again and again, all appearances will begin to appear like rainbows in the sky, and we mature. The empowerment is also called a ripening or maturing empowerment. So it's very beneficial to make these connections. Then when the mind has matured, how do things appear? So things, outer appearances still manifest, you still see them, but there is no thought of that's real and that's lasting, that's a real thing. There's no such a thought. And there's no such a thought also with regard to sentient beings. There's no thought of they are real and it will always last and so on. Because one has realized that everything is impermanent. And this is when one has recognized the natural state of the mind. So although appearances still manifest, everything manifests, there is no mental proliferation that pursues any thoughts of a concrete reality, any kind of thought of this is real. So that is what we call appearance emptiness or empty appearances. So again, appearances are your own mind. The basis of all appearance is your own mind. And you should understand that your mind and others' minds is one and the same. And when you understand that, then you actually recognize the one taste. Everything becomes the same. So there is no analysis then of what arises. It begins with not grasping at anything as real, which leads to a transcendence of extremes. So there's no more side, taking of side, like this or that, or existence or non-existence. Both both kind of become the same. Both sides become the same. And so single-pointedness, to summarize again, is related to the base empowerment. And that empowerment is also related to constantly maintaining mindfulness. So single-pointedness, a one-pointedness, is to always be in a state of conscientiousness. In whatever you do, you are aware, you are alert. And so, for example, when you're in a room together with many other disciples, if you are mindful, then you are not beginning to think about those other disciples in terms of they're here or they're not here, they exist, they don't exist. There's no mental analysis like that. You know that everything that appears is compounded and therefore impermanent, and there simply is no thought about anything. Then the mind just remains naturally clear. And so this is what we call the union of clarity and emptiness. So on the outer level, things still appear, but you recognize at the same time that they lack any true inherent existence. And so things can appear, but there is no grasping at them whatsoever. But the mind continues to sustain clarity, which is clear mindfulness. And so this is how you master, how you perfect one-pointedness. And then you continue on in that state all the time. And if you're, so this is what happens when you always continue in that state. There's no more, you don't perceive things in this concrete, real way. And then what happens when we see it, but then we are not able to sustain that state? So then we again see things, we think that's real, and we follow it. So we follow our thoughts about that thing, and that causes us to accumulate karma. So it happens basically because we are unmindful. It is because of unmindfulness that we create karmic imprints over and over again. If you are mindful, then actually you cannot form any further karmic imprints or these habitual tendencies in your mind. So that's really the crucial point to understand here. What's most important in your practice is to sustain mindfulness at all times. And so as you continue through these different levels, you basically develop this ability to always be in a state of mindfulness. And so then there are many different subdivisions, many different divisions in the 4 yogas of Mahamudra, depending on how deep, how strong our mindfulness has become. So for example, the one-pointedness has a 3-fold division of greater, middle, and lesser, and so on, and so forth. Each of them has this division. And so basically it shows how the mind becomes increasingly stable. So first there is one-pointedness, and so what we need to understand here, that basically the essential point of one-pointedness is to stay in a state of mindfulness at all times. And the state of mindfulness is a state of clarity. Your mind is clear all the time. So this is what you develop in one-pointedness. And so once you have understood that, then you have to habituate to that, familiarize yourself with that over and over again. So what is then an experience of one-pointedness? It is said that it is an experience of a great bliss that is based on clarity and emptiness. A clear and empty, an experience of great bliss that is clear and empty. And so clarity here, clear, means that the mind is clear and without distraction, mindful. And what does emptiness mean here? It means that you do not engage in the conceptual thinking of me and him, a duality of self and other. There is no intellectual thinking. There's no thought, no conceptual thinking. So normally, our thought, this notion of me, I, is so firm. It's always really there. And when it comes into contact with any sense object, like a form, a sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on, whatever it connects to, immediately there is a feeling of a natural feeling that this is real and this is concrete, and one has an idea about it. And so once this grasping at a concrete reality is there, then these objects will generate very strong feelings, sensations within us. And so these feelings, once a feeling is generated, an imprint is placed into the mind. So first you need to understand that. And so then a duality is cleared away. That's the meaning of emptiness. So what needs to be empty? I mean, the mind needs to be empty of dualistic thought. And that is something that develops on the basis of first an understanding, like an intellectual understanding. You understand that self and other do not actually exist separately. So you can understand that on the level of mind, there is no duality. And so then how it becomes an experience is that whenever you meditate and your mind is in a state of clarity, you're clear, then actually it happens on its own through the power of your prior understanding. When you actually are in a state of meditative clarity, duality will naturally disintegrate. There is no dualistic grasping. So the experience really arises through the power of your understanding. And then when the mind is free of dualistic thought, that is a state of great bliss. Because what we call suffering actually is nothing else but our thoughts, the thoughts in our mind. And mainly, it's either attachment or aversion. So on the coarse level, it's attachment and aversion or hatred. And the more subtle counterparts to attachment and hatred are hopes and fears. So it's all of these thoughts, this thinking in our mind that creates all of the suffering. So therefore, when you're separated from that, when there is no grasping, no thinking in your mind, then naturally you're in a blissful state. So when there is no dualistic thought in a mind, things still appear, but appearances are seen as empty of self-nature. Because you do not grasp at a duality, meaning you have no dualistic thought about these appearances. And because you do not think of them in a dualistic way, they also will not generate a feeling in your mind. So there is no feeling or karmic imprint that is placed in the mind. The mind is just like a mirror, and what appears is like a reflection in a mirror. So this is how the experience of empty appearances begins to arise. And when it is recognized, when empty clarity is recognized, that is an experience of great bliss. So it is a state where the mind is just extremely happy, extremely joyful. So great bliss. And then when you continue on through no elaboration and one taste, you just continue on in that state. You always meditate in that state. And finally you reach an effortless state of non-meditation where this state never leaves you again. And so for now, in the beginning, when we meditate, then it happens that we are mindful, that we are in that state. But then when we are not in formal meditation, then all kinds of thoughts arise again in our mind. And at that time, it's very difficult for us to just let go of all these thoughts. We can just do that when we are in meditation. And the reason, basically, really why we are unable to let go of our thoughts is really because we cling to a dualistic existence of self and other. So for as long as you cling to that, there is no way you can ever really let go of all these thoughts. They will just grow stronger and stronger. But just when you begin to recognize that each and every a small dualistic thought, then gradually they become weaker. Otherwise, if you just let them pass by, then it might just be a small thought in the beginning, but then you can't let go of it, so it turns into a very powerful thought, like a huge ocean wave. Then it becomes very strong. So therefore, in the beginning, we slowly disintegrate, or let go of the various thoughts that appear in the mind through practice. And then so ultimately we come to an experience of great bliss, the great bliss of this empty clarity. So again, the clarity is a state of mindfulness, and emptiness is a state that is free of dualistic thinking. So there is no thought about anything whatsoever. There's no thought of something is true, something is real, and also no thought of something is not true. And this state is naturally very blissful. So a very blissful and joyful feeling arises in the mind. And so this is how you should recognize all appearances, all thoughts and appearances within your mind and outside. So what's the most important point about the one-pointedness? Milarepa said, as we said before, we need kind of a landmark, a road sign. That's very important. And what is that in the context of one-pointedness? It is that like a sign basically of one-pointedness is one's ability to subdue or kind of suppress the thoughts. So for now, they are just held at bay. Thoughts are held at bay. And what that means is that you don't begin to grasp at thoughts. When thoughts are not held at bay and you're grasping at thoughts, then you go either into the affirming way direction or the negating direction. Either it exists or it doesn't exist. Whichever way you go, in the Sakya, it says, if there is grasping, any grasping, you do not actually see the view or kind of see the nature of the mind, the true nature. So therefore, if you just let it all be, whatever arises, you don't grasp at it, you just let it be as it is, it will naturally subside, just like a wave on water. So that is the one-pointedness, really. And one-pointedness, according to this text here, so we have an instruction by Dharma Kirti, the Drikung Chutak, on the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. There is first a threefold division of one-pointedness, the lesser, medium, and the greater one-pointedness. And it says, at the stage of lesser one-pointedness, it is still difficult to maintain a state of samadhi that possesses the experience of empty clarity and bliss. This stage lasts until one can easily experience such a samadhi whenever one meditates. Then second, at the stage of medium one-pointedness, one's samadhi is stable. At times, samadhi even occurs without engaging in meditation as one goes about various activities. And then third, at the stage of greater one-pointedness, throughout the 4 activities, day and night, the meditation state becomes an uninterrupted experience without divisions of formal meditation and post-meditation. So we are basically moving from a state of effort to an effortless state. And so in the beginning, at the lesser one-pointedness, the meditation still requires an effort to be able to stay one-pointed. And then in the medium one-pointedness, then whenever you meditate, you really set your mind, it doesn't create you too much difficulty. You can meditate. And then when you come to the greater one-pointedness, then you are always in a one-pointed state, continuously. For example, when you wake up instantly, you are already in a state of mindfulness. So this is how Dharmakirti here explains the different stages. And so mainly what's most important to understand about one-pointedness is what experience do we need to gain ultimately from one-pointedness. We need to gain the ability to hold our thoughts at bay, so complete control over the thoughts. And for as long as one doesn't have that control, one has not yet gained a complete, what's called an assurance, like a confidence in the view, because one will still grasp at a duality. And for as long as one sees a duality, one cannot gain complete confidence in the actual view, the nature of the mind. So if one has gained such confidence in the nature of the mind, then, for example, even though there are a lot of people around you, you know that we are actually not separate. There is no duality. It all has one basis. So that's the most important kind of road mark for the one-pointedness. So one-pointedness is achieved. The result of one-pointedness is achieved if you sustain an ongoing state of mindfulness. So how does it become when we have gained some experience in the practice of one-pointedness? For example, when we practice a sadhana, then a certain feeling arises in us. So, for example, while you're doing the visualization, you meditate on a deity, or you're doing a drupchen retreat, during that time, there is, maybe you can call it a mere aspiration toward it, but what we really think is real is still our real life. So we still think that, so that's good, but what's the real? It's not real. What is real is my life. So that's how we still think, because we still have a dualistic grasping in the mind, and that actually is a sign of not yet having mastered one-pointedness. It's a sign of not having really mastered the view, the natural state. Now, if you have really habituated to it, then whatever practice you engage in, you will see that as real, more real than your real life, the world out there. You will see the world out there as not as real, because, as the Buddha had said, everything is compounded and therefore impermanent. And so a sign also is that the grasping at this life will get lesser and lesser, and your pure perception, a pure view, increases more and more. So these are the qualities of one-pointedness that should arise. For example, some people, when they practice a deity or when they join a drupchen retreat, they have a very special feeling, sensations that arise within them, which are also signs of practice. And so it is said that a sign of practice then is that whatever you can think of in the mind, this is what appears. So whatever is your state of mind, this is what appears. So such a person understands that whatever appears is the magical play of one's own mind. And also another sign is that one's faith and devotion grows stronger and stronger. And one's dualistic thoughts become weaker. And one's compassion for others increases. One's grasping at the true existence of appearances and one's own thoughts disappears. So these are the qualities of one-pointedness. And then there's one more sign of one-pointedness, and that is, so we have said a sign of meditation is an absence of afflictive emotions. So to correlate that with one-pointedness, so when a very strong affliction arises, that's when you have to be able to meditate. For example, you get really angry, and then you remember right away, I have to meditate. And then you meditate, and then slowly, like ice melting, the anger goes away. So when that is the case, then you can be confident and really determine that that is, I have basically mastered the yoga of one-pointedness. Now remember Milarepa's words. And what were Milarepa's words? He said, One-pointedness is the ability to hold your thoughts at bay, to suppress them. So remember that and think that actually I'm able to hold them at bay. So then you can kind of stay really what do you call, like really cool. I can do that.
I will sanga come on, thank you. See you tomorrow.